they're like, don't build an SMB company. Distribution is so hard. And they're totally right. Distribution is really hard.
There are 1,001 ways the company will fail. What I'm focused on is like the one way the company might succeed.
And we are very serious, but we are not, we're not yet four-letter domain serious.
You have to push the team, right? You hire great people and you want to get out of their way, but you also need to push to keep driving the velocity.
When you're a CEO, no one's limitations are your excuse.
All right, welcome everyone. Super excited to be here tonight. I'm Jeff Seibert. I'm the founder and CEO of Digits. This spring, we launched the world's first AI-native accounting platform. We work with hundreds of top startups, accounting firms, small businesses to automate the tedium of the accounting workflow. It's literally accounting software that does it for you. Digits is my third venture-backed company. Way back in 2007, I helped run Stanford University's Entrepreneurial Thought Leaders Seminar Series. And that was the genesis of this event. Back then, we hosted founders like Vinod Khosla, Reid Hoffman, Mark Zuckerberg. And today, I'm super excited to be back hosting today's generation of world-class entrepreneurs. So welcome to Between Two Founders. You can also check out the full series online at digits.com/BTF. Before we dive in, I want to give a huge thank you to a couple key sponsors. So first, please join me in thanking Digital Garage for this awesome space tonight. The team at Clay, which is building a really incredible AI proctor that helps catch candidates who are cheating on your remote interviews. Super important as that becomes more prominent. And we're also really lucky to have two winery sponsors tonight. We love partnering with Wine Country right up north from us. And so today I want to give a huge thank you to Bacigalupe, an incredible family-owned winery out of Sonoma, and Vincent Arroyo in Calistoga. If you haven't tried their wines, give it a try right after. All right, so let's dive in. So today, I am super excited to welcome Jean-Denis Greze, the CEO and mayor of town, where he's bringing AI to the painful world of small business tax preparation and filing. JD is a first-time founder, but he's a legend in Silicon Valley. Before town, he was the CTO of Plaid for quite a while, where he helped grow the company from just 40 people to over 1,000 and hundreds of millions in revenue. So let's jump right in and welcome Jean-Denis.
Cool. Thanks for having me, Jeff. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Really appreciate all of you.
So we have about an hour tonight. I want to start with Plaid, and then we'll move on to town. And we're going to have plenty of room for questions at the end. So think about questions as we go, and we'll take live questions from the audience at the end. So, all right, let's start with Plaid. What drew you to the company in the early days? How did the founders convince you to join?
So before Plaid, I worked at this company called Dropbox. I joined there in 2013, worked for 4 years. And I was very lucky. I saw Dropbox go from a couple hundred people, 100 engineers, all the way to 2,000 over 4 years. That's like pretty crazy growth. By the end of it, I realized I missed the early stages. Like I missed what it was like to be, a small team that understood every customer. And I felt like I needed to go somewhere else and like relive that experience. And I have ego. We all have ego. I have a lot of ego. And so I thought I could also be a better VP Eng than any VP Eng that I'd worked with before. So I was like, I need to find a company that has product market fit, that needs to scale, where I can really, with engineering, help the business be much more impactful than it could be otherwise. So I went around, I interviewed with a whole bunch of companies. I met a lot of founders. And the things that resonated about Plaid were, one, I knew I would be able to scream at the founders and argue with them and get to the right outcome. And if you're ever in a position where you aren't a founder and you want to join a founder, or if you're a CEO founder and you're going to hire somebody, I think you can't underestimate how important it is to be able to have a direct conversation with your execs. And so I felt that from William and Zach when I met them. We spent a bunch of time together, and I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I knew we would go at it, and they would listen when they needed to listen, and I would listen when I needed to listen. And then the second reason for Plaid is like a pretty magical company because it's a platform. And whenever you have a new area of the economy that's developing, and for Plaid it was fintech, the nice thing about a platform is you benefit if the global thesis is correct. And I thought the global thesis of fintech, which is there needs to be innovation in financial services, I thought that was true. Right? And I would be at the center of it, and I would get to see all this innovation happen from these great entrepreneurs building on top of Plaid. That seemed like it would be so cool. Like, how cool is that to just be at the middle of just a wave of innovation and That's what it was like every day. And then the rest of the stuff, I just got lucky, right? In life, you get lucky sometimes. I have plenty of friends who picked companies that looked really good on day one, and maybe it didn't quite work out. So I don't think I'm a genius or like very special. I think I'm good at my job, and I had a lot of luck, in getting to where I am today.
From their perspective, so I believe as a founder, every hire you make needs to solve a problem. That's why you're hiring this person. What problem were they solving by hiring you?
There were a lot of problems. A lot of problems that I didn't find out about until day one. Fundamentally, I think Zach and William are brilliant product people and business people, but they'd never worked at scale at a company. So they didn't know how to manage a team. They didn't know how to recruit systematically. They didn't know how much to invest in reducing technical debt. There are all these core things that you need to do if you're going to build a successful business. They just didn't have any experience with it. And usually when you're a founder, when you don't know how to do something, there's two choices, right? You can learn how to do it, or you can hire somebody who's done it before. And you're only two founders, so you can't learn to do everything. So I think they saw in me someone who could help scale the engineering team. There were some also very interesting real challenges to the technology kind of strategy when I joined. For example, little known fact, when Plaid started out, it didn't build bank integrations. The first version of the company actually had been built on top of Intuit, because Intuit, as part of Mint, had a bank connectivity product. And then Intuit deprecated that product after Plaid had sort of reached product market fit. And so roughly around when I joined a few months before, the whole point, the company was like, well, I guess we got to figure out how to build bank integration. So I joined, and we had to solve that really core problem. And that's literally today one of the two core competencies of that business, right? Being great at building bank integrations and working with banks. But when I joined, we were kind of starting over with that journey. So there were a lot of those things that were there.
You shared a story with me about William, sort of an interesting experience with him let go. What happened there?
Okay. So William, there's two founders at Plaid. And now there's Zach, the CEO, is still at the company. William ended up leaving to start another very successful business called Column Bank, which if you're doing embedded finance, you should check out. So the way I always thought about them in a way is that Zach is a little more passive aggressive in the sense that if you're not doing the right thing, you have to push at him for him to tell you, but he'll tell you, and that's great. Once you know that about him, he's easy to work with. William is just aggressive. William he's just biting at you at all times, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so there was this meeting. I've been there maybe 3 to 4 months. So 3 to 4 months into a new job, VP, your chances of being fired are at least 50%, right? That's the survival rate at that point. And I go into meeting, and it's William, it's me, it's this guy Baker, who was running product at the time, and I think Al, the person who was running design at the time. We all go into this room, and it's a prioritization meeting. We're supposed to prioritize the roadmap. And I don't know, maybe 7 minutes into the meeting, William and I would just start jawing at each other and just arguing. It's not a screaming culture, so we're not screaming, but we're just going at it. And then suddenly William gets up and he looks at me and he's like, "This is the single worst meeting I have ever been in." And then he just walks out the door. And I'm there, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, uh-oh. What happens when I come into the office tomorrow? And there's this knot in my stomach of just fear that I've really fucked it up. So that's that. Next day, I go in, I talk to William, we have a one-on-one. It wasn't the worst meeting. There were some things that he fundamentally disagreed about my approach to prioritizing. There's things I disagree about his approach. We worked it out. But I was I'm on thin ice. What is going on? So after that, I'm working 16 hours a day. I'm running everything by him before. I'm spending all this time just making sure we're on the same page, right? Because you got to work with a founder. You're there for their vision, to enable their vision, and you're trying to correct them where they're wrong. But you got to be an enabler at some level. So this happened. So for 4 months after that, I'm just at my limit, and I'm trying my best, and I just don't know how it goes. And then we have this company offsite. So every year, early in the company, everyone would go to Mexico. The whole team would go to Mexico at a hotel. And we would do a little bit of team building, but mostly it was chill time. And there was this 2-hour meeting where the founders would talk about the vision for the next 12 months. And so we go into the meeting, and William and Zach, they talk about the vision for the next 12 months. And then there's a Q&A, and I learned later that William had planted the question, but someone asked William, like, what's the best thing that's happened to you this year? And William said, well, the best thing that's happened to me this year is that we hired JDG. And then he started listing all the things that he no longer had to worry about because I was around, which were all things I was super stressed out about that I wasn't quite meeting the bar. And at the end of that meeting, he basically he said to everybody, like, look, listen, like now I don't need people to come to me about engineering things. If you have engineering things, you go to Jean-Denis. Don't go to me. I don't want to hear about it anymore. And that's like an amazing leadership moment because when a founder does that to the entire team, right, then you have the trust. Then you can really operate from a place of confidence. You don't have to worry that an early employee is going to go around you to talk to the founder. Like he's just said, like, no, like that's no op. So it was a painful period to get to that, right? But I view that as like that's really when I did my best work at the company because I earned the trust and I aligned myself with what leadership needed. You're a CEO now, so I'd love to ask you a little bit like, what you do as a founder CEO to let execs in, because I think that's a skill. And there are a lot of good people who get hired at startups who aren't successful. It's not because they're not good, right? They never get to that moment of trust. So you have to create it as a founder.
Yeah, we have actually a great example of this. So my background and passion is engineering, but also product. I love crafting the product and the user experience. And in starting a company, you really have to think as a founder, what roles do you sort of want to run forever versus what do you want to build a team around and delegate over time? And for me, one of them of like, I want to run product forever. Like that's my true passion, except not today. Because we got lucky enough to recruit Craig Walker, who is the co-founder and CTO of Xero. So he has 20 years of experience in accounting software to join us full-time a few months ago, and he's now our head of product strategy. And it's not a role we recruited him for, it's not a role I was willing to give up until I saw him execute and saw the experience he brought to the table, and I was like, this is the time to let go.
Do you still sometimes want to just, override?
Not at the strategy level, here? Definitely at the pixels level. Okay. I really care about, my team makes fun of me, but the corner radiuses on the dialogues and the stuff in the product, like, yes, I still dive into some of the pixels. Someone has to. That's awesome. Well, actually, speaking of product, so you started leading engineering, then you took over design, then product. What were those transitions like?
Well, part of it was just necessity, I think. I took on support and design when, for both functions, either a leader had left and there was a gap and there was no one on the team who could probably manage the complexity at the time. Product was a little bit different. Product, I think we talked a lot about whether the business would be better run as more business units or whether we needed a more central product function. And one of the things that I think at Plaid we were very good at was having clarity around when the product strategy needed to coalesce around a different vision. So there's this point in time, like about 4 years ago, when the company decided that, hey, we're not just an aggregation company, we're a network data company, and we're going to build a suite of products around lending and a suite of products around fraud and a suite of products around payments. And what's holding us back from doing that is that these are each very different and complicated product areas. And so we would be better off hiring very senior people to run all of these lines kind of as independent businesses versus having like a CPO kind of person that would set the product vision broadly. And so at that point in time, it made sense for me to quote unquote like have the product leads report to me because they didn't need me to be the like product leader like period. They needed me to take the vision and to make sure we hired and empowered the right people with the right incentives to be successful for each of the business lines. And what happened after I took on that role is I realized that there was more impact actually for me to keep leaning deeper on the product side. So I would go and like partner with one of the GMs when there was like an opportunity in one area to really push forward, or when I would see like, hey, there's a common building block around these three like business lines that we should think about pulling out. So like one example is we built this product called Remember Me, which means when someone comes back to Plaid to connect their second or third app today, you don't have to go through the entire authentication experience. Like often we'll recognize your device and a few other things will allow you to reconnect an account with just a few clicks. And like that's a common building block because it's helpful for lending because it means you can get to a loan decision much faster. interesting for payments because you can do one-click payments. It's really important for aggregation because you don't have to connect 17 accounts. You can connect multiple accounts at once. So that's a common building block. And so my job I viewed as like recognizing that and then being like, hey, we need to create this capability. Like now's the time to create a group that's going to do that thing. But that was more like prioritization and recognizing common needs. That's where I thought the business could be high leverage. And the final thing I'll say is, looking back, I should have decided, am I in product land or am I in engineering land? Because I think I did both very well, but at serious personal cost. And I think the business would probably have been slightly better if we'd had 2 people. And I could have chosen my destiny, right? And then we could have backfilled the other. And after I left, that's what the company did. And I think it's been very good to realize that like one person can't do all the roles, right? And it's easy to get in your mindset where you're like, want to do more things, but it's often not right for the business.
Makes a ton of sense. I want to shift gears to talk about industry dynamics because Plaid sits at the intersection of a lot of different things. And I'm curious, so you said it started first on Intuit, and then you had to build it yourself, and it was basically a screen scraper in the initial implementation. Were you afraid you'd be blocked? And what was the evolution to become more API-driven and sort of like sanctioned integrations over time?
My first week, I think a top 5 bank blocked us for a few days, and I was like, oh my God, will this equity be worth anything? But I think the equity did fine. I think we were afraid. But there's different lenses that you can take to this stuff. So this is pretty nuanced. First, there's a law. It's called 1033. There's a sentence in the law. The sentence says effectively, you, as a consumer, own your financial data. So the first thing to understand about Plaid is we basically ask the end user to empower us as their agent to access and share their data with a financial app that they wanted to use. So from that perspective, like you can, whether it's screen scraping or APIs provided by the banks, it's like the user's will for the data that they own to be shared with another app. And the fact that the law was there, I think, very much protected Plaid, right? Because it exists and the regulators would pay attention to it. And you can say whatever you want about banks, but banks do not like to piss off regulators. They don't like to do it because regulators can make banks' lives very difficult. So that actually, I think, made us feel like we wouldn't be blocked unless we made a blunder. And so the things we paid attention to was more like our security posture and our privacy posture, because we didn't want to give any excuses for someone to want to block the company. So that's the first lens. I think the second lens, which is important, is that we were small. And when you're small, you're not really noticed. So maybe this is like a year into my journey. I'll always remember this. We moved. I don't think this story's ever been told before, so I won't say any names. But we moved for some bank. They implemented an API because we wanted APIs. Like we didn't want to be sitting on top of screen scraping. So they like built an API. And we started migrating the traffic to the API. And then the bank was like, oh, we have a problem. Our mobile usage numbers are going down. And they report their mobile usage numbers to Wall Street. And they were very proud about their mobile usage numbers, but we were like 40% of the mobile usage numbers because we were using the mobile API that they totally approved of at the time. And it's like a weird thing, but that's like a weird situation to have. So we resolved that with them and we figured out how to move to the API and they did what they had to on the usage front. But it's like, they were friends. This is a friendly bank. They knew we were using the mobile API. It's just like there's these weird like things that happen. The third lens for me is like, are you doing the right thing? Like fundamentally in the world, you can believe the world is optimizing long-term. Well, the world actually doesn't care about humans, so it's absurdist. Physics does not care about humans, doesn't care about fairness or any of it. We only impose this structure on the world. But let's go back to human land. I believe that over enough at-bats, if you're trying to do things that align with what's right for individuals, like you will be rewarded, right? And I think Plaid very much plays towards a better version of the universe where there's more competition in financial services, more lending available to consumers. It's easier to understand your finances. It's easier for a business to understand how they're doing. It's easier for you to switch bank accounts. Like that's a good thing. It's easier for you to pay through other methods in your credit card because it has like cheaper rates. These are all good things. That's what we were fighting for. And maybe at any one point in time we would lose a battle, but I think the war is aligned with what's better economically for the universe, right? And then the final thing that I think helped us is that before Plaid, or in the early days of Plaid, some banks had blocked Mint, and there had been some newspaper articles written about that. And so the banks knew that blocking the fintech ecosystem would be not great from a PR perspective. And so, like, and again, that links to us doing a good thing for the universe, right? So you look at like that basis, that building block, and it's a lot, right? If you're aligned with what the regulators want, and your positive outcome for the world, and you're small, so initially people don't detect, and by the time you're big and they detect, it's more advantageous for them to work with you than against you.
Awesome. So when you start a company and you think about go-to-market strategy, a lot of companies, big successes come from a big advantage from being the first mover. And Plaid wasn't one of those. Yodlee had been in the space for years. How did you all win?
Yeah, but you need to capture the next wave of innovation. If you're a platform, it's not about first mover or second mover. It's about where are the disruptors that are going to be the mainstream institutions of the future. And those were like, it was Venmo, it was Square, it was Robinhood, right? These Coinbase, these are all Plaid customers. They're all Plaid customers. And even though they were small at the time, they were on us because of what? We had easier to use APIs. We cared more about the quality of the product and the uptime. We went to all these events. Like, we had an event at the Plaid office early on where literally the founders of all these companies would show up. And so the banks, Yodlee was selling to banks. They're selling to the wealth arms of banks. They didn't care about any of you here. And, I mean, Silicon Valley mattered a lot less at the time, right? So if you're here and you believe that fintech's going to win and fintech's using you on day one, then you're going to ride that wave forever. And Plaid will keep riding the wave, right? I mean, as Robinhood's users get older and have more wealth and do more on Robinhood, they're going to keep banking with Robinhood like trading with Robinhood, eventually banking with Robinhood. And who will power the money going in and out and help with the fraud? It'll be a company like Plaid, and it'll be Plaid. And that's why you win for the long term. So if you're like building a platform company, I think the really important thing is like, do you have the winners of the market early on? Like Stripe's another good example. You know, people don't think about it, but like Stripe had like Lyft, right? And they had Airbnb. Like early on, they had some of these platforms that everyone looked to. Everyone wanted to do what those platforms are doing, and so then you can succeed on that. And you look at almost every platform company, they had early on some of the winners of a generation of innovation. So for platform, it's super important, and I think Plaid, we crushed that. By the end, it was funny, like I remember one of the competitors, they like copied our API. Like, I mean, not fully, but it was pretty close. And it's funny because our API had not mistakes, but some edges that were a little rougher than they would be if you get to design from scratch. So you're like, well, clearly, you know, it's like very beholden to Plaid. But it didn't matter, right? It's like cargo culting. They're just copying the API, but the API is not really why Plaid won. Sure, the API was great and well designed, but it was all the things that we did around the API and the ecosystem that got us to be successful.
So Plaid went through what seemed, at the time, to be a very successful exit in the form of a Visa acquisition that then didn't happen. How do you rally a team after that?
Well, I think it was a great leadership moment by Zach, by the CEO. I always remember this. So look, before anyone is going to acquire you, if you're a CEO and someone asks you, what's your plan for the company? Like, what's your exit strategy? You know, you're going to be like, giant IPO, like, you know, generational company, like, we believe in the mission. The best way to execute on the mission is to like be alone and go be the next Facebook, right? So everyone has some version of that narrative. But then when you say yes to an acquisition offer, and let me be clear, the Visa acquisition for employees, for investors was incredible relative to the size of the business at that time. I mean, they just crushed, like Plaid really crushed the negotiation for that. There's like some stuff in the terms was so good for everybody. So at that point, you're like, why? Why was Plaid doing that? Is it for money? And it wasn't. and this is like if you're on side, I think you know this, like the reality is there was a lot of tension with some of the financial institutions. There was a lot of products we wanted to build that we felt like if we were within the umbrella of someone like Visa, it would be much easier for us to execute on the vision. Like if you're part of Visa, your bank relationships are no longer a problem. It's like a non-issue. And so Zach always talked internally about that decision in terms of the mission, right? And why we would be more likely to succeed on the mission through the acquisition. And then when the regulators decide that the mission is so important that actually there's a risk to being part of Visa from like an incentives perspective or whatever was going on through the DOJ's head, I don't really know, honestly. And it breaks down, the mission is still intact, and the founder's belief in the mission is intact. And so the people will rally around that, and I think we rallied really well. That being said, it was a really suck-ass 12 months. It was awful, right? I mean, it was really hard. Like, it was the middle of COVID. It's really hard to motivate your team to try for big swings when there's an acquisition about to happen. You hire differently suddenly. Well, as soon as the Visa acquisition happened, there's a lot of people who were like, great, fantastic people, but they wanted to work at a public company. And they were really excited to work at Plaid if Plaid was going to be part of a public company because they were going to get liquidity and a bunch of stuff that mattered to them. Before that, we were like startup people where we were like, it'll be 5 years before we get any liquidity, right? And so you hire differently, and then the acquisitions falls through, and you've hired people who have kids who need liquidity to like put their kids through school, and suddenly you don't have the liquidity anymore. So like, what do you do? So there's just a lot of like, I think the hiring pattern changing was the most difficult thing. I think the people who were there before were mission aligned and worked through. A lot of people who joined during the acquisition, there's a group that was mission aligned and stayed, and then a group that was like, I can't make the family life trade-offs that I want to if you're a private company. And I think that was really tough. I talked to a bunch of founders who'd been acquired. So we'd done all this work, talked to like Instagram founders and Meraki founders and about like how you get acquired into a bigger company and do it really well. And the one thing we didn't do is talk to people who'd gone through failed acquisition. So when I had a bunch of friends of mine were like at Figma, and then Figma deal was announced, and I was like, yo, I don't know what's gonna happen with this thing, but And so I was like, yeah, we should chat because I think there's a bunch of stuff you all should think about in case it ever falls through.
Amazingly prescient. And I mean, tying it to the vision is 1,000% the right way to do it. That's a really great articulation of it. I have one last question, then we'll move on to town. Can you comment on open banking? You mentioned Rule 1033, particularly with JP Morgan's sort of threat over the past few days to start charging all of us for access. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, first, I don't have any inside information on Plaid on this anymore, right? I left, like a year and a half ago. My personal feeling is that it's egregious, and it's definitely not the best. It's not the best outcome for people, and I think the reasons given are transparently not true. And I think it's also there's something very false to it because the banks fought really hard for the access to happen on their platforms and not to follow standards that existed. And so now to claim that there's like a cost to it when they're the ones who wanted to impose the cost in the first place, it just doesn't, it's like a lack of intellectual honesty that I don't like personally, on a personal level. I don't like it. I think what's happening clearly to everybody is they do not like competition. They know that fintechs will continue to compete with them. They've always wanted to like thwart fintechs, and they're trying it intelligently however they can. And if the regulators are weakened or not likely to be listened to, it makes sense for them to try this. That's my personal belief. Sorry, there's someone from Platcom somewhere that's like, that was not in the bullet points, but hopefully people recognize it's egregious, and I'm a big believer again in the right outcome for the consumer winning out. And I believe strongly that regulators very much care about like individual Americans, individual businesses, and their control over like their finances. So I think we will get, hopefully, cooler heads prevail across the board, and we get to a good outcome.
Awesome. So let's transition over to town. I'm curious, everyone who's working at companies, I've been in this as well, you're trying to make the decision, do I leave this job? Do I start something? Do I take that jump? What prompted you to say, okay, this is the moment?
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a couple of things. First, I had heart surgery, which very few people know. And so when you have those things, you sometimes reconsider like your list of priorities in life. So that happened a couple of years before I left. And it definitely got me to think more broadly about my kids and my life and what I was spending my time on. And as part of that, I realized that I love Plaid. Like, I love that company so much. Truly love the culture, the founders, the mission. But it would be fine without me. And I didn't need to be there until the IPO to feel like I had done a good job. I just didn't. And I should ask myself what I want to do. And what I love to do is build products closely with customers. And I think the ultimate version of that is to do it really early stage. And the ultimate version of that is to do it as a founder, right? And so I was like, do I stay at Plaid? And there will always be another cool challenge at Plaid. And when do I decide that the time it is to make the jump? And I don't know if I'll be a good founder, right? So I didn't know. So I was like, I think the time has come to do it. And then I talked to the board and to Zach. And the question was like, can I leave so that you wouldn't miss me? Maybe you'd miss me because I can be funny, but you wouldn't miss the work output. And so, yeah, we spent 6 months just making sure that the company would probably be a better version of itself without me than with me. And I will say after 7 years somewhere, you're like in some ways sometimes like a bad crutch, not really as good as you could be. New ideas, new ways of thinking are needed. So yeah, so we worked out the transition. I left. I spent a few months with family, and then I got hungry to build a business. So yeah.
So what was the initial idea, and how did you validate that was something worth going all in on?
Yeah, so initially I talked to a couple of friends, one in particular who had built companies in the accounting space. And he said something like, hey, listen, like when we've needed to build something around tax, or when our customers asked us about tax, there was no product there. The only solution was to work with a traditional tax firm. And someone should really think about whether you can build a product out of business tax prep. So that was like the thing. And I was like, okay, so he and I, we went and we looked. So we talked to a bunch of SMBs, and we talked to a bunch of platforms, like vertical SaaS companies, or tech-enabled bookkeepers or neo-ledgers about, hey, like, have you thought about tax? Do business customers ask you about tax prep? Like, how do you, like, how important is this to you? So we had all these conversations. And about 3 to 4 weeks after a bunch of conversations, I get emails. And the emails were like, hey, if you build this thing, we'd love to use it. And then the SMB owners were like, hey, that thing that you were telling me about, honestly, like, I don't like my CPA. I'd love to try it. And that's like catnip for founders, right? Because when you're doing discovery, people take the meetings because they're nice, but then like no one wants your thing. No, definitely no one's emailing you telling you they want the thing. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. There's demand for it. Like there's a product to be built here. Now the question is, can you build a product out of tax prep? Because it's easy to say, but for business tax prep, you have to do things like understanding books, understanding contracts and leases. You have to like get a lot of business context from people's emails and invoices and whatnot. And if you can't do that, you can't prepare the taxes automatically. It's like human brains are necessary. So before LLMs and AI, you couldn't build a product out of this thing. So the first part is like the demand was there. Second part is do some diligence to figure out, do I think with a trend line of LLMs that you could productize this experience? And I started feeling good about that. And then the third part, I fell in love with the SMB business owners. I fell in love is maybe a little strong, but I really like them. They're really cool. They're people who could work for the man or the woman, the person, and they don't. They've decided that their kids will go to school and they will save for retirement and they will go on vacation based on the small business that they're running. It's a small business. It can never be venture scale. There's no billion-dollar outcome out there. They probably will not make more than they would working for someone else, but they don't want to work for someone else. And they're a business owner, and everything that gets in the way of them running their business, stuff like tax, they just don't like. And I love talking to them. It was super fun. And I was like, I don't want to do another B2B SaaS company. I want to sell to these people. And all the VCs are funny. They're like, don't build an SMB company. Distribution is so hard. And they're totally right. Distribution is really hard. But, you make choices in life. And I thought this would be people I would be excited to build experiences for and product for a while. So those are the three reasons. And then we did it. We raised some funding, got some customers, prepared some taxes, built some AI. Now we're building the product for next year that leverage the AI to automate the tax prep. And founders always pretend like everything's going well. Lots of stuff stresses me out. I don't sleep as much as I should, but I think we had a good first year. So I'm getting everything that I wanted. I'm getting all the stress, all the customer interaction, my team is amazing. So, and we have whiteboards. We're in person, whiteboards. There's whiteboards in the office. You're like, the thing isn't working. You go in the whiteboard and you draw on it. That's what I live for.
What I love about this is the exact same reason we started Digits is the small business owner, nobody starts a business because they want to run a business, right? That is the single worst part. And so using solutions like this, it can make their lives so much better. So I'm really curious. I heard you locked in a partner before writing a single line of code. Yeah. How did that come about? How did you actually basically deliver value without building anything?
Honestly, it was just pure track record. I think they just knew that we would build in time a better product than anyone else out there. And all their partners don't have any code, right? Their partners are traditional CPAs. And so it's their existing partners, it's they would forward an email to them or send them an Excel spreadsheet of the books, right? And we were like, okay, well, you could connect your QuickBooks and we can create a dashboard for you to see the status of people. And these common tasks, we'll use AI so that there's fewer errors, right? And so it was very logical to them why someone would need to build a product there. Mm-hmm. And we had made one hire. So we had hired a head of tax who was awesome. So we'd made one hire out of someone who'd done tax at scale for a lot of other companies. And I think that brought a lot of legitimacy to our ability to deliver. But I'm very thankful for the first partner. We wouldn't be where we are without them. Because once you get the first partner, the second partner is a lot easier and the third's easier. And I think for next year, it's not really a question of can we do it? It's a question of how much cheaper and better can we do it for you, which is I think where the value will be delivered. And just to be clear to everybody, I love SMBs, but our entire distribution is not directly to SMBs. So what we do is we partner with other companies that should offer tax, and we allow them to offer tax to their customers, right? So the observation is we've had a decade of vertical SaaS and accounting platforms being built. They're doing an amazing job. They should all do tax. Tax is not strategic to them, but it is important to do well. They should just partner with us to do tax. And endgame, everyone should partner with us to do tax, and we'll just do as good a job as tax as anybody else can in the world. I'm a big believer you just do one thing really well eventually. It doesn't make sense to compete. And we'll see if we get there.
In this AI hype wave, what's your AI thesis for town? Where does it really make an impact? And are you going to be commoditized by foundation models?
Yeah, I don't know. The problem with that question, I like that question. I want your answer to it actually after this. So I'm going to ask you the exact same question when I'm done. Say I believed that the foundational models in 5 years commoditize tax prep. So if I believe that they're commoditizing the entire white-collar economy, and then what do I do with that piece of information? You know what I mean? How do I act differently? So that's my pure, the world of Plato answer. My concrete answer is I think product matters a lot, even with LLMs. Product, meaning tax, it's not optimal when you're preparing your taxes for your tax chatbot to just write 17 paragraphs on things. It's better maybe if they had a table with exactly the right inputs for a tax scenario. It may be nice if you had the ability to do scenario analysis for different tax treatment. And so you think, what's the perfect UI to do that? And maybe that UI is powered by AI underneath, so you can do a bunch of scenario modeling. but it's still not like a pure chatbot. And so I think there's like all these little details in the product experience that really, 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 really matter. And that's what's going to like create a winner in the category. So today, that's what we're spending a ton of our time on. That being said, I think a business owner asking a simple tax question, like I think whether they will go to us or to ChatGPT for the like first degree answer, I don't know if the difference will be that great in a few years. But I don't think that's the product that we're building. Like my dream is if you're a small business owner, you sign up for Town, and what happens is on January 15th, you have an email and it says your draft tax return is done. And you click on it and you get a beautiful video that explains to you your taxes and how much money we've saved you. And then you press one button and it's filed. And you've thought about tax for that 10-minute interaction of that video and getting the return. Like that's the dream. It's not an agent that you go to talk about tax. It's like tax is no longer something that you think about as a small business owner. It is just done for you. That's what we're trying to get to. I don't think that's within the foundational model like power in the next few years. I think there's so much that you have to get right to get there, and we'll see if we do it. But tell me for you, because I think this is any AI company. This is like the question that keeps you up at night.
Yeah, for sure. We've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and the models, the applications of AI for tax and for bookkeeping are definitely very, very different. The big thing we've learned is bookkeeping is fundamentally not generative, right? You don't want it hallucinating your books and making up transactions or charts of accounts for your business or whatever. It's a predictive problem space. And actually, classic ML is far superior at it than LLMs. We did some benchmarking data this spring, and what we've seen is we benchmark every single LLM as it comes out, and they all appear to be asymptoting at around 70% accuracy in bookkeeping, which is interesting until we then ran the same test with human accountants. And human accountants doing the books for a business that's not their client appear to asymptote around 80% accuracy. And our predictive models train on the individual business, we're now getting up to 98+% accuracy. What it seems like is it's not a difference between the LLMs versus the predictive models. It's a difference between knowing the business or not. And because accounting is so arcane, it's so specific to that industry, that business, that geo, et cetera. And so if there's a world in which you can ingest the entire context history of that industry and that business and their financial transactions, maybe they will get good, but that's not a near-term scenario.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think tax is like in many ways more simple actually than bookkeeping, because you don't need to understand all of the business to do tax. If a bookkeeper has created books that are good, going from that to tax is very hard, but it doesn't have quite as much context from the business as you need to have. But we're still in all these positions where we just generate questions for the business owner, like things that you couldn't know by looking at all the invoices in the world, all the contracts in the world, and you need the answer to the questions to know what the right tax treatment is. And so it's kind of the same. It's like I do ask myself, like, can you automate the human parts of the interaction? Can you generate the email? Can you take the human judgment out and still rely on the business owner where it's absolutely needed?
Yep, totally. I want to talk about your sort of role transition from CTO to CEO. What has surprised you most about that? Nothing.
I don't know. I mean, in a way, you always dream that when you're the boss and you tell people to do something, it'll get done, and then it just doesn't happen, and it doesn't matter what your title is, it just doesn't happen, right? That's like life. I think the difference is more founder than it is CEO. Whenever something goes wrong as the founder, I really feel like it's my fault. And I say wrong, I mean like anything that could be improved on, I really kind of have the power to change it, right? I can hire anybody I want. I'm not going to fire anybody. We could let go of anybody that I want. I could change the structure. I could change the incentives. And so I do ask myself a lot, how could we move faster? What could we have done to move faster? How am I failing my team? Why am I not clear enough when I communicate? And now it just touches on everything. It doesn't just touch on the technical direction or whatnot. So I think it's more like that ultimate ownership. There's no one behind me. I can't blame the CEO. Like, if you're not CEO, you can always blame the CEO. You're like, well, CEO doesn't want to, you can do that. Like, he doesn't want to invest in the project. I don't want to fight with him anymore. It's over. Like, you have like an excuse, right? Someone else's limitations is your excuse. When you're a CEO, no one's limitations are your excuse. And the board, the board's the board, but the board's not in the business, so they can't really tell you what to do at any one point in time. And so that's probably the biggest difference. Also, there's like limitations. Like I'm doing a lot of go-to-market right now, and I'm being like too honest and direct sometimes for go-to-market. I should be a little more salesy. So there's things like that like new skills that you realize you don't have. And it's fun to learn new skills, but also you got to be honest with yourself. Is it right for the business for you to do a fun thing versus maybe the thing that's right? But I'm curious for you too, because you've done 3 companies, right? So It's like I'm actually curious this time around what you wanted to do differently that you felt like strongly about as CEO.
It's a really great question. Each company has been a progression in size. So the first company I sold when we were 8 people, Crashlytics, we got acquired when we were 18. Digits is now 70. And every change in person, every couple hires completely changes the dynamic and sort of your role as CEO and what you're trying to do. I always felt for Digits that we had, with both of my prior companies, to be honest, we never monetized them, really. Crashlytics got massive usage, but it was a free product. And so with Digits, I really wanted to build a business, which sounds stupid, because of course you all want to build a business. But I was like, we need to get really disciplined on building something from day one that people will pay for. And the nice thing about fintech, about accounting software, is like you're used to paying for things in this space. But this has been a whole new world for me because I also have no sales background, go-to-market experience. And so you try to hire the absolute best folks you can, and then you also try to learn as much as you can by talking to customers, talking to experts, other founders who have done this before, and so on. So I'd say the big difference for Digits was to get like really professional about the go-to-market motion.
And you did that even from the beginning? Like that was more your focus in the product?
We thought about it. I mean, both of my prior 2 companies, I purely built what I wanted.
I see. All
right? Like I just had this problem with Crashlytics. My app was crashing. I built the SDK I needed to fix that, and then it turned out friends wanted it for their apps, and it just blew up from there. With Digit, it was a far more intentional, like customer development. Here's what the market needs. Here's how we should approach the space. That type of thing.
Got it.
I'm curious. Okay, one other thing I was curious about is with Plaid, you saw founders, right, scale very large. I'm curious, what did you learn from Zach and William that you followed, and what have you done differently?
I joined after Plaid was this size, so there's like the dark forest. I don't really know what happened then. Let me think. Yeah, so there's like, my founder personality is different than my CTO personality. I think something that William did super well is just like, he was relentless on the level of execution and kind of how hard you had to work and the bar that the company had to uphold. And sometimes it was like too much for the culture, so to speak. So my job was, hey, how do I tone it down a little bit? Like, how do I make all the sharp edges kind of more soft? And I think now that I'm the founder, in some ways I'm a little too soft. I've like internalized too much, like, I'm nice, I'm giving you the balance that you want. But the reality is, like, startup is like, we're gonna die if we don't make the hard trade-offs, right? And so I'm trying to re-endorse my kind of like a little bit hard driving, not super friendly, you're not gonna like me and that's life personality. And I'm still haven't found that. And I feel like people at Dropbox didn't like me that much because I was kind of like an asshole and hard. And I kind of lost that when I had someone that was more hard than I was, so to speak, that I had to compensate for, and I need to find like the hardness. So I'm trying to explicitly get to the right balance point there.
I think this is actually one of the hardest things, because as the founder, you have to push the team, right? You hire great people and you want to get out of their way because you don't want to micromanage everything, but you also need to push to keep driving the velocity. But it's also, you can't push too much because then your great people leave and they can go elsewhere to other opportunities. And it's a really, really tough balance.
Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah, so I don't have a solution to that. Maybe I can get some coaching from you.
No, I would say I also maybe am too nice as well. Like I love building stuff with people, but you also have to set the deadlines and goals and drive to an outcome.
What's interesting, I don't know what your dynamic is with other folks on your team, but with my co-founder, Tony, so my co-founder is like a unicorn. He's like top 0.1% designer, top 0.1% product thinker, top 0.1% AI person. Okay, so he's like, he's very special, but he's kind of funny. He's very relaxed normally, and I've known him for a long time, and I've forgotten this. He's very relaxed, and then sometimes he'll go in a meeting and he will just like explode at a pixel, right? And it like the universe is not right because a part of the product, and I love it when he does it with the team, and I need to find that in me about other things that are not just like pure product and pixels. But there's like the dynamic. I'm trying to find how can I be most effective given like how special my co-founder is at some things, and that just takes time, right? Like you're like 10 months into a company, you haven't figured out that relationship. It's like it's like when you're dating somebody, you need to have some big fights before like to stop before the big fight. Like we're still figuring out, we're not fighting, but we're still trying to figure out like what's the right dynamic where the company gets the best out of both of us. So, that's also really hard because it's he's very special and very different from a lot of folks I've worked with before.
But this wasn't one of our questions, but I'm curious, how did you find your co-founder? How did you find this head of tax that's excellent? Like how have you approached hiring?
Well, Tony, I've known for a long time. So we've been friends for a long time. We worked together at Dropbox a really long time ago, but he was more senior than I was there. He ran product design. We just reconnected. He had been at Google working on AI stuff, and he wanted to start something. So we've been spending time together for a while. And then the other person, so the story of the company, there's a third person that could have been a co-founder, and it didn't quite work out. They knew the head of tax and helped bring him on board, and so that's how that person joined. Everyone afterwards, it's interesting. Like 2/3 of the team has worked with one of the two founders, and that means there's a lot of like trust and a lot of prior relationships and wars and battles that you can lean on, which is really good. And then the other third are new hires, and I want to lean more on the new hires, like people who haven't worked with us before, because I think it's, if you've worked at company A and you just bring all people to company A to your new company is not company A. The constraints aren't the same. The way to build is not the same. The trade-offs between speed and quality aren't the same, right? So the more people you bring in that have the same philosophy, yes, they work very well together, but it's probably not the right philosophy for the new business. So you got to mix the cards a little bit. So it's good that we have like two cultures and then a third, but I think we need to figure out what makes us in the next few months. I don't know for you, like were a lot of your early hires people you'd worked with before, given everything you'd build?
Yeah, a lot of our early hires were from Crashlytics. It's still about 1/3 of our engineering team. And so it is a material percent, but we were very conscious, even in the early days, to also explicitly augment with people we had not worked before, because we didn't want the cargo cult of like, oh, well, we did it this way then, and so we do it this way now. That, I agree, totally does not work. All right, I have just a couple more questions, and we'll open it up to Q&A in a couple minutes. Naming, also one of the hardest things about startups. Yeah. You didn't start as Town.
No.
And so what did you start with? How did you come to Town? How did you get the domain?
Yeah, we started as the standard tax company because we're the standard. Like it's just standard tax. It's great. Got the domain. Domain was like a few $1,000s. Standardtax.com, still have it, love it. From a trademark perspective, standard X is not good. It is just hard. It is a hard place to be. And so We thought about it a bunch, and we were like, standard tax is very cool, but if we ever want to be more than tax, and if we want to be able to trademark anything, it isn't going to work. And then we started looking at different names, and we were looking at street names and SF, and we were like really excited about Townsend. Okay. And then I always remember I had a meal with one of our biggest investors, First Round Capital, and so I was having a meal with two of the partners there that I've known for a long time, Todd and Brett, and we're having a good meal. And then at the end of the meal, they go, "Oh, what you told us you're thinking of renaming the company. What are you thinking?" And I was like, "Oh, we're going to rename it Townsend." And they're like, "What?" It was like loud in the restaurant. They're like, "Townsend." And we're like, "Okay, yeah, this is just definitely not going to work." And we had this like domain thing, like we were going to buy the domain, and it was not $3,000. It was more than that, but it wasn't too expensive. And we're like, abort mission. This just isn't going to work. And when you do domain buying, there's like the ones that are available and then the ones that aren't. And we were like, well, we don't like Townsend, but actually like town is kind of cool. And what about that domain? And it was on the list from one of the domain brokers that we worked with. It was on the list of domains that people had been trying to sell. People had been trying to sell it for like $3 or $4 million, and it hadn't sold. And it turned out that the seller had like an MIT connection, and we know a bunch of MIT people from Dropbox, and we were able to get them to sell the domain for like just way cheaper, literally just through the network connection. And it is expensive, but I'm not going to say the number, but it's not $1 million. So and it's hard to get a 4-domain name. So we were like, you know what, like this is worth it if we're going to go for it. And what's interesting about the domain is it like gives you immediate legitimacy in a way that is absurd in the universe. But people think, oh, if you're at town.com, like you must be real serious. And we are very serious, but we are not. We're not yet four-letter domain serious. So so that was good. And naming, I'm terrible at naming, so this is something that Tony drove end to end, and he was the one who was having the EBGBs about Townsend, and then suddenly he was like, let's do Town. I was like, can we get it? And he was at MIT, and so he was able to swing the thing magically.
I won't tell the full digit story because it's too long here, but I completely agree with you. The reaction's the same. People are like, wait, you have digits, and it's .com, and it's spelled correctly? And so for those of you naming your company, definitely the name does matter. It gives you this air of legitimacy way before you deserve it whatsoever.
But do you have digits.ai? Because I don't have town.ai.
We also have digits.ai, yes.
I was like, I had this to-do list item since the fall, which was like, get every domain that's town related, and I have not done that. And they're just going. And I really wish I had town.ai. It's going to get more expensive.
My co-founder was obsessed with domains, and we started again back in 2018, so way before AI. He bought up basically every digits X you can, and now we pay way too much in domain fees. All right, last question, then we'll break it open up to audience Q&A. You're 10 months in, roughly, I think. What is your advice for everyone out here who wants to start a startup today?
I don't feel successful enough to give any advice about running a startup. I will say it's super fun, it's super hard, and the advice is like if you have that part of you that wants to do it, and there's this other part of you that tells you that you're going to learn to be a founder by doing something else, I can tell you I don't think you will learn to be a founder by doing anything else except being a founder. And that may not mean you want to found now. There may be plenty of reason to like make money in another way. Maybe you want to work with people that you really like that already have a company. There's lots. I'm definitely not a person who feels like founder is the coolest thing or the best thing ever, but it is unlike any other professional experience that I've had. And when I used to sell new grads to work at companies like Dropbox and Plaid, I would have this self-talk that I would give, which would be like, well, you should learn what it's like to work at like a scale-up, because then you can use that experience to go and do a startup. That's not true. And I know that now because I see everything that I spend my time on. The only thing that's true there actually is it is easier to fundraise if you've been in the industry and have had successful products under you and have put yourself in a position where you've advised other founders and like helped VCs do due diligence on deals and all that stuff. Like there's things that can help you be a successful founder that aren't about the core skill set of being a founder. But I think the core skill set of being a founder, really you just learn it on the job, and there's not much that will prepare you for it.
I would add two things. It helps you hire because you've worked with a lot of people. It's really helpful to build your network at a big company first and then be able to hire those people. It also helps if you've seen a professional engineering team or marketing team or sales team or whatever run to a degree. I think particularly for engineering, because a lot of first-time founders, as you saw at Plaid, don't really know how to run a team.
Yeah, the first piece of advice I agree with, but I think if you also have really smart friends from college that want to work with you, and that works just as well. I think you can hire. I actually think VP Eng is like, you can hire a VP Eng. And I know a lot of companies, like a ton of companies where the founders are like good hackers or product people. They got the business to, it was like 15 engineers. The team was like falling apart. It was like a disaster. And then they hired someone competent and it worked. And maybe they fired that person and then hired the next one. But like, you rarely hear about a company failing because they like couldn't get the VP Eng hire right. There's just a lot of good VP Eng out there.
That is true. Definitely true.
But other functions may be more true, but I think that one, it's covered. You can hire me after, in 15 years after I've acquired Intuit and retired, I'll be on the market again for a VP Eng.
Awesome. Jean-Denis, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So let's... All right, let's do some Q&A. We have mics, so raise your hand and we'll pass around. We'll start right here.
Hi, thank you so much. On your on the podcast with Sasha, you mentioned something very interesting. You said that if you can find a pain point that with the technology change and the large enough time, you can get excited. If you weren't doing Town, what would you do based on that formula?
If I weren't doing Town, I don't have any good startup ideas. This is a hot take. Right now, I would go look at robotics. If I could look anywhere, like if I had the freedom of a bunch of time, I would go look at robotics. Because I think, like, fundamentally, if you believe in AI, right, AI will work really well in areas where, so the current generation of AI, it's gonna be a lot of white collar automation, and there's gonna be great businesses to be built there. But right now, I think, I'm not saying you're late, but there's a lot of investment has gone into this category, right? So if AI works and you can control a system with like a goal and sub-steps to do the goal, areas of the economy that are very elastic, meaning if you make something cheaper, people want to buy more of the thing, are places where a lot of money can be made. So coding is elastic, right? If coding becomes cheaper, people do more coding. So that's great. Well, I think the physical universe is extremely elastic. Like if you can build more things, people want more things. If you could build more houses, people want more houses, and so on and so forth, more cars. So I think robotics is like a very interesting place that I would go spend a lot of time, because I think there's enough investment in the foundational technology happening at some of the big labs at other places that there will be breakthroughs, and I think people have not really thought anywhere near as much as they need to about applications there.
I would also throw out smart home, because there was the huge wave over the past decade, and then to me it's sort of plateaued. Like, where's the true AI thermostat? Like, and many other devices. I'm wondering if there'll be a next wave of all that.
I did look at that one when I was doing due diligence.
There we go.
Yeah, we can.
Awesome. All right. Way in the back.
Thank you, Jeff. Whoop, that's really loud. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jean-Denis. I'm Tom. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Plaid. We do an AI interviewer, AI proctor, and things like that. But this thing I wanted to ask about the tax thing was that once you have this tax AI functioning, you can essentially make money with this in different ways, right? You can sell that AI as it is to different consumers. You can use that and become a tax firm yourself. You can also sell it to tax companies that do tax themselves and make money off of that. So there's just a lot of ways you can make money with this, but how did you choose where to approach first, and what do you think are the good, I guess, go-to-market strategies for things like this that enhances or optimizes a lot of the manual tasks with AI?
But so I ask myself that question once a quarter with my co-founder. And we go in a room and we talk about whether it's better to sell the tool to existing tax prep firms or accounting firms as a tool that they use internally, whether it's better to offer a wrap service where we do the tax for them, or whether it's better to go direct to the SMB, or indirect via partners or direct to the SMB. And the reason we ask the question quarterly is because I can't see through the fog to know which one is better today. So I'll tell you like a few of the dimensions that we think about a lot. So if you're like a AI ultimist, like if you believe that it really will be able to do quite a lot of the work that goes in something like tax prep, then I think the most logical place to play is to go to build a platform that either direct or indirectly people can put in front of the SMB. Because it so fundamentally will disrupt the economics of the given industry that I think a new player will build faster than existing players can adapt. So that's like our core thesis right now. However, very important. What we don't know is the willingness of individual business owners to want like a human advisor as part of how they operate the business. Because if the human relationship is important, and the right play is to power that human with the best technology so that they can do less of the boring prep work and more of the interesting advisory work, right? And so, like, truth be told, we're also exploring that significantly because what's interesting about our tech is it adapts to both approaches very cleanly, right? And so we don't know which one will win, and I don't think of them as at odds actually technologically, because AI makes it much faster for you to adapt like the core engine to these different situations. So I'm totally open to a world where the existing players continue to do the advisory work and are able to do it better and faster because of our engine underneath the hood. And I'm like totally okay with that. But I could also see a universe where the behavior of the business owner fundamentally changes. And there's some interesting data points for me, like not qualitative, not quantitative. So when I was doing user research in the fall, business owners were more skeptical about AI than they are today, like to a material amount. Like materially today, they are more likely to do stuff, like create posters for events, like put their business plan together, do basic financial planning, like in things like ChatGPT. And so when you go to them and you're like, hey, do you think AI could do your taxes for you? They're more positive now than they were 9 months ago. And I don't know where that trend line ends. And I don't know where they keep valuing the human element. And I don't think anybody knows, right? So we view it as like, we're gonna create the core engine because that's valuable in both universes. And then on go-to-market, we're gonna test out how can we make all of our customers look like heroes? How can I make an accounting, like a bookkeeping firm that works with me look like a hero? How can I make a tax partner at a large firm that wants to have better unit economics look like a hero? How can I make a business owner for their small business owner feel like a hero because they're spending less time on taxes? Like that, I think that's the way we think about the tax engine. If we get more take on one area or another, we'll follow it. 10 months into the journey, like I have philosophical belief, but I don't have market validated trajectory, like confidence on the ultimate trajectory. And by the way, when you're a founder, I think you and I were talking about this a little bit like earlier. It's like you can't pivot all the time because like your team is like, you're an idiot. Like, what are you doing? Why are you pivoting all the time? But you also can't be a turtle or an ostrich. So you can't be slow and you can't ignore what's happening out there. And so with AI especially, it's moving so fast. Like I think a real skill set is listen to the market, to your customers, to what's happening, and adapt, because you can adapt much faster than you could before, right? And so, you were talking before, like, do you believe that AI, it'll solve tax, and so none of this matters? I'm like, if that's true, I want to be in the arena. I want to have my ear closer to the ground than anybody else, and I will find a way. I will find a path towards bringing value to the world. I'm confident in that, and so that's what you got to be really good at.
Yep. Completely agree. Yes.
Hi, my name is Amarachi. Speaking of pivoting, right? So how do you pivot or shut down a product line without losing the team morale or investors' confidence?
Great question. So how do you pivot without losing the team morale?
So I don't know yet because we haven't had to pivot. I think we're transparent internally about what the challenges are, right? And I think the way I look at the team is the team buys. Every day they wake up and they decide, do I believe in the thing, right? And you got to be careful as a founder, like you're too charismatic. You know, you can bring people past the edge where it's actually the right business or risk profile for them. So I just view it like I'll keep being direct with the team about what's working and what's not. We did a thing in the early spring where like we built a feature that just didn't work at all, right? And for the person who worked on it for a few weeks, it sucks. There's nothing that sucks more than like writing code and no one goes through it. But they understood we are going to have many shots on goal. 50% of them aren't going to work, and that's what they're okay with that trade-off about it. And we're very explicit about that's what it's like working at Town or working at a startup. I think if people weren't okay with it, it would actually tell me that I am not recruiting the right people more than it would tell me that I'm losing the team through pivots. Now, that being said, I've never been in a situation where I've had to do a hard 90-degree pivot totally away from an idea. There's founders who've done that very successfully, so I just don't know. And I hope I don't ever have to face that, to be honest, because I think that's a big challenge. I'm sure you've experienced more of this than I have.
So we started in 2018 with the belief, the hope, that machine learning would unlock better accounting. Like, right, AI, LLMs were not a thing. And it was directionally correct, but it was taking longer to get there than we thought. And without question, now a few years ago, I think it was like 2018, 2019, or no, 2020, I'm losing track of time. We started getting nervous that like the ML wasn't developing at the pace we thought. And we did some product pivots because we're like, we need to find a different way to approach this problem that doesn't rely on that. And then, of course, ChatGPT comes out, GPT-3 comes out, and so on, and it reinvigorates. It's like, no, actually, now there's re-acceleration in this. We can go back to our original core concept because we see the underlying tech improving. I think if you're very honest with the team about like what the motivation is and what's driving it, you can bring people along on that journey. And credit to our team, like everyone came along on that journey, and it's like, great. We had a similar thing this spring where, to the prior question, we launched Digits for startups, for small business owners. You can go and sign up, and that's great, and it's working today, and you can do it. The demand we saw from accounting firms was incredible. They were signing up for this self-serve B2B product and trying to make it work for them, even though it was only business by business. And so we pivoted our go-to-market approach this spring to welcome these accounting firms in because we're following that accounting channel demand. And so I think if you tell that story and it's like, this is what we're seeing, this is the opportunity, like it's really worth it to shift focus and do this, then the team understands that. Great question. There's one in the middle back here. Let's go back here.
First of all, thanks so much. I have a question. Through your experience at Dropbox, you learned a lot through scaling about scaling a startup. What made you leave specifically where you thought, okay, I'm missing that about the early stage? What was it specifically?
I had a meeting actually with the VP Eng where he basically told me he would never see me as the VP Eng there. Well, he was CTO actually at the time. I'm good friends with him and it's all good. But I think there was a realization the company needed more. They needed more people who'd been there, done that at the kind of scale that the company was at then, and I just wasn't that person. I'm like very adaptable. I'm much more of a like a few teams to 400 or 500 people person than I am a like 1,000 person to 10,000 person kind of leader. And I realized that. It was like, he told me that, and then I was like reflecting on it. He's like, he's right. I'm actually not the right person for the business. Like I want the promotion, but I just want it for like status or whatever. It's not what I enjoy. It's not what I'm good at. So that was like a wake up call. And then, yeah, it's the ego part, right? It's sometimes in life you think you can do things better than other people. And like there's one approach to it where you just complain all the time. And then there's the other approach where you're like, well, let's see how I can do it. And I'm a big believer in like you bet on yourself, take risks, right? So yeah, that's what made me decide to go smaller, and yeah, it mostly worked out. I think what's funny about it is there were some things about the Dropbox culture that I liked, and there's some things I didn't like. And when I went to Plaid, I spent a little too much time early on changing some of the things that I didn't like about Dropbox, and didn't spend enough time about realizing what had happened that had made the things that I liked at Dropbox happen. Because the things that are good at a job, it's not magical that it's good. Things have happened. People have created that culture. They've spent time on it. And sometimes it's done so well that you don't realize that it's very manufactured, and it took a lot of hard work to get there. So then when I was at Plaid, I remember, I'll give you like a very, very simple example. Dropbox was one of those, like, engineers could get budget to do almost any project, almost absent business impact. That's a little too strong of a take, but you know what I mean? There was like, it's like, to make the system better or reduce the technical debt or whatever, like, you could do the work. And then not a lot of people would call you out on, like, what's the exact ROI on this thing? So when I got at Plaid's culture was very different, very pragmatic. It's like, this is the business outcome. We want to get there, like, quickly. These are the things that we have to do to get there. I was very proud of that. I was very proud of pushing hard for pragmatic, business-oriented culture at Plaid. You can be business-oriented, you can still care about craft, you can still build beautiful things, but you're really caring about the business outcome. Plaid's a great business. The thing that I didn't realize for maybe 2 years at Plaid is that there's a kind of project that is not measurable, that objectively you can't defend using business outcomes. It's about taste, it's about going out on a limb, it's about taking a risk. And we had less language and ability to talk about those things. And at Dropbox, it was the opposite. It's like you could do those things all day long, and sometimes it meant that we didn't do kind of boring things that would bring revenue. Eventually Dropbox is very good at making money, so they figured that out. But I hadn't spent enough time thinking about how do you create a culture where, engineering work for engineering's sake can be done. And obviously, you don't want a company that's 100% that, but you also don't want a company that's 0% that. And that's like, so yeah, that was like an interesting set of lessons about what you get for free anywhere and what you don't. And by the way, no culture is perfect. So you can't get everything in life. You make choices about things you're good at, and for everything you're good at, there's a thing you're bad at, right? You just got to pick the things to be good at that are what you want for your startup or what's aligned for the business outcome. And once you realize that, someone was asking a comment about how do you get your team to be okay with a pivot. It's how do you get your team to be okay with anything that's not going well? You just tell them it's a choice. We've made the choice for that not to go well. You can't lie about it. It has to be a choice. And you say, like, we will not spend time on this thing. We've made that choice. You no longer get to complain about it because it's not under consideration for 12 months. In 12 months, we can make a different choice, right? So does it for me. I don't know. You've been a founder for so long. I mean, could you even work for the person?
I think I'm cursed now. Yeah,
it's over.
The moment I stop doing something, I just start coding. Coding is the single thing I love the most in life. And then the problem is I start coding something, and then I'm like, oh, that's interesting, and maybe I should show it to someone, and maybe I should hire someone to code it with me, and then it just spirals back into a startup. So, all right, we're gonna have to do 2 more questions and then wrap. Let's go sitting down right there. Yes.
Hi, Jean-Denis, and thank you for the very honest conversation. Really enjoyed it. And I'm Rachna. I worked at Gusto as head of product for their tax business, so I speak the same language, and definitely think what you both are doing is wonderful, and imagine there is a future where AI bot can take the bar and be your augmented CPA and bookkeeper. My question is more relevant for Jean-Denis. I'm in a similar boat where I've had a career of corporate employment at different sizes. One thing I don't see in your experience is that 0 to 1. So you talked about scaling, but what you're now doing is 0 to 1, and having done it once before, I know that's very different. What's the thing that's the most scariest, and how did you rationalize that fear?
I don't think I get scared, is the answer for you. I don't see much of a point in, look, there's a large chance that I fail, and then there's people who have trusted me with years of their career and investors that have trusted me with their money and friends who've invested. And I will feel sad and ashamed and a lot of other things about failing, I'm sure. But there's no point in me thinking about that right now. And I actually think those people all just want me to try my hardest at the thing. And if I fulfill that contract with them, it's okay. The only place, honestly, where I feel, not even fear, is it's like I am trying to instill values in my children. And I worry that if I fail, they may not listen to me as much as they would otherwise. That's like a small side fear, but they have no idea what I do at work, so it probably won't happen. But like, look, people talk about privilege all the time. Here's the part, right? Like, I have been successful. I have money in my bank account that can see me through ups and downs. I have a family that loves me, parents that love me. I'm healthy, and thus, I don't know, like, I don't have anything to be scared of or to lose. And that is privilege, right? And by the way, if it fails, someone will pay me to do something afterwards. So because of that, it is easy for me to say that I'm not scared. I think it is, for a lot of people, scary to do something that you haven't done before. But my belief in life is that, like, I only get one life on Earth. It is short. And so I need to do the things that I want to try. And I'll fall on my feet. I'll find some way to fall on my feet somewhere. So we'll see.
Your question brings me back to something I was asked a couple years ago, which was like, aren't you worried if we do X and like the company fails? And I had to step back and think about it because that's not how I think about it. Like, there are 1,001 ways the company will fail. What I'm focused on is like the one way the company might succeed. And if you like put all your energy on that, then you can sort of will that into reality, I think.
One way.
Maybe there's a second. We'll see.
I'm scared.
All right, last question. Right over here. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Anish. First of all, thanks a lot for this talk. My question is mainly going back to your earlier question, answering your earlier question about seeing a trend line about customers being a bit more open to using ChatGPT and AI tools for tax services, etc. I just want to ask you, have you ever encountered or seen any instances with existing customers or potential customers where they express concerns about having their sensitive information shared with you and your team, or just any roadblocks in that case? Because we do see in some cases where there's a paradigm shift required to acquire customers. So just wondering if there's any template or process you and your team sort of follow.
Yeah, so we do, we have twice a week, we actually have a business come in and use the software in front of us, right? And there's lots of things we've seen. Some people definitely don't trust AI, some people trust it more than they used to, whatever. I think the data that we ask for is 100% what you would provide your CPA anyways, right? It's like your books and your last year's tax return. And in tax land, it turns out the IRS has very much, has put a lot of liability around improper use of tax data, because a while back, some tax preparers started selling their customers' data for advertising. So tax data is very protected. Like, as soon as you're a tax preparer, basically the only thing you can do with that data is prepare taxes. So we have a really good answer to your question, and the law forces us, there's no way we could do anything untowards with the information. So far, because we're only asking for things that people are used to providing their CPA, we haven't had any issues at all, right? And I would say SMB business owners, they just want the thing to be solved. Like they really want the thing to be solved. They want it to be solved. They want it to be solved. They want it to be solved. You solve it for them. They're happy. Like that's like the core part of the experience. One thing I've asked myself is, could we not ask the end customer, the business owner, as many questions if we had access to their email, right? Because if I had your email, I would have the invoices. I could see the thing where I'm buying a vehicle in order to commute to work. So, blah, blah, blah. You can use this tax deduction. We're not doing that today. And the reason we're not doing it is because I don't think people would give us access or trust us to have access to their broad email just for purposes of preparing taxes. But I wonder if at some point in the future, like we can earn that trust from an end customer. And so my view on privacy is like, look, like you should start with a minimum and you should deliver value. And if your way to deliver value requires like broadly more access than people have expectations today, that's like a flawed hypothesis behind a product in the first place. But you can earn trust over time, right? If you can deliver value over and over again, and then you can ask for more. And so I am hopeful that we can build a brand where people would trust us with more information if it saves them time. But that's not what we need to get to product market fit or to 10 million or 50 million in ARR, right? It's a down the line journey to earn that trust. I don't know, I'm curious for you.
I would build on that and say pretty much any interesting business I can think of has access to sensitive data. That's why the business is interesting. Tons of different examples. At Crashlytics, we implicitly knew Uber's DAU. We knew the DAU of every top app, right? Obviously, we did nothing with that data. At Twitter, we had everyone's DMs. That's why Twitter moved to start encrypting the DMs, right? Like every business you have, you're going to deal with sensitive data. You need to have a security posture that recognizes that your customer trusts, and that you've taken the steps appropriate for your industry to deal with that data. So like in fintech, we're SOC 2 Type 2 certified. You basically don't have a business if you're not. You have to be. And so it's based on whatever vertical you're operating in, how do you treat the data, what data is it, and do you have a justified purpose for your business to have that data? And if you build that trust, then I think people understand. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Amazing questions. Jean-Denis, thank you.
Thanks for your time. This is awesome. Really good.
Awesome.
Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Digits Financial and follow us on your favorite podcast platform at Between Two Founders.